I've made up my mind over and over. Keep pressing rewind, but I'm getting older. Tried every door, don't know who I'm looking for. And I've made up my mind over and over. I can't be everything you want me to be. I can't be everything you want me to be. Finally, I can see the light through the leaves, but it's all gone. But it's all gone. What comes from the ground now is returning. It's all the same sound, and my ears are burning. In some strange home, don't know who I'm working for. I've made up my mind over and over. I can't be everything you want me to be. I can't be everything you want me to be. Finally, I can see the light through the leaves, but it's all gone. I can't be everything you want me to be. I can't be everything you want me to be. Finally, I can see the light through the leaves, but it's all gone. But it's all gone.
Good morning, Easter Camp. I know that some of you are joining us about 11:30, having slept in and watching this later, but that's all right. Welcome to all of you. This morning, great lineup again. We got some great throwback spoken words from Danielle taking us through the story of Easter. We got Micah Bourne is going to pop up today sometime, and one of his glorious here spoken words is awesome. Yet again, some of the highlights. Today, we're going to hear a message from one of our very own, Matt Martin, Waikato boy, born and bred. He's one of my favourite talks of Easter Camp. It's solid, it's great. Remember, take down some notes as he's talking. What are the things that he is saying that you want to talk about with somebody after this session? Tune in, brace yourself, enjoy what we've got for you this morning.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
What does Easter Camp mean to you, bro?
Easter Camp. It's a big question, actually. Easter Camp. I know they're just immersing themselves in that, this culture of God and realizing how a life of God is, and then they can take what they feel here, this amazing, just joy all the time.
Coming together, meeting new people, sharing about Jesus, having a good time and just praising the Lord for the amazing sacrifice that He made for us. And losing your voice, of course, losing your voice. It's all what Easter Camp's about.
I guess it's a way for me to just truly understand how great and powerful God is. Not because of the lights and the flashing and all this, but because of the fact there are no distractions.
God is a God of anger, but he's actually not. He's actually quite the opposite. A really good reminder every time we come to Easter camp that no matter what stage of that, God is still a God of love. He's still a God of peace. He's still a God of joy. And that nothing will ever change that, and nothing will ever change the love that he has for us.
Wake up to your light. Wake up to our Father. You are created to shine, to be the brightest of wonders. Wake up to your
I think it's just like, it's a good time to like connect with God, but also a good time to make new friends.
Like getting to know Jesus more and connecting in a bigger way and getting like that closer friendship.
It's about making new friends with all the other youth
friends, family, just
and
having
like
fun, you know.
finding like who you like really are with others.
I think just the main sessions, they hit people pretty hard. It's like, I don't know, it's just amazing, eh?
And that's what I think Easter camp does really well, is they always have joy and passion with everything that we do.
The fact that I don't need to worry about social media on my phone. I can think, focusing on God, focusing on Him, zoning on Him, and I have so much support and there's nothing pushing me away.
For me, pausing is hard because I don't like talking to God. I find it hard to just sit there and talk to someone. What I do to pause is just stopping for a few seconds, not like an hour, but a few seconds. I just pause and I say thank you for the things He's given me. It doesn't matter if you're saying thank you for the new clothes you got or for not letting it rain, because I bet it doesn't matter to God. I don't spend a lot of time with God, and even just taking a few minutes to stop and say thank you for this, or thank you for that, that really does make a difference.
Your love's all around. How could I leave? You filled up my heart, my soul, my love, my everything. I'm caught in your gaze, I'm caught in your gaze. You watch over me. You brought me to life, you called me home. Now I am free. Sing, your love's all around. Your love's all around. How could I leave? Filled up my heart, my soul, my love, my everything. Caught in your gaze, you watch over me. Brought me to life, you called me home. Now I am free. Draw me after you. Behold, He comes, leaping over mountains after me. Draw me after you. Behold, He comes, leaping over mountains
In the next 2 days, I hid my mourning in rooms full of people who still held his name sacred below their tongues. Hope and sorrow traded off, washing over me like a soft tide. He said he would be back in 3 days. The waiting felt like a pregnant earth ready to turn itself inside out. In the next 2 days, his power lingered, a rumor no one could kill. Nervous that our sadness would shake from ashes into anger, they gave his sealed tomb 2 guards as if we could try to steal him back. Something in the wind wouldn't let the dust settle anywhere. We were all a theory waiting to be proven one way or another. I was a reluctant prayer, anxiously pleading that the gravity of the last 3 years would be as real as it felt. I needed him to come back. On the 3rd morning after his death, when the sun had barely lifted its eyes above the skyline, I woke to a shuddering ground. The 2 women that were with us were gone, certainly on their way to the tomb in the wake of an uncertain violence. The 3rd day, I checked my belief like a letter I still expected to arrive. I needed him to come back. Where were the women? It wasn't safe for them. What if we were wrong? The anxiety untied itself inside of me. Eventually, they returned to us in a sweating glow, hands shaking like Jerusalem pine needles and grins shaped like they had just seen a miracle. Like they had just seen a miracle. Like they had just seen him. They poured their story over low tones, how they laced their walk with prayer, how their sad exhaustion kept them from fearing the guards, how there were no guards, just the mouth of an empty tomb rolled open. The hard confusion that the body they came to anoint could be stolen, how their breath was the only thing stolen when an angel on fire with light, an obvious citizen of heaven, assuaged their fear and told them that our friend was exactly where he said he'd be, alive. The proof of his appearance, our breathing teacher, told them we would see him in Galilee. We would see him. The 3rd day, the rumors would roll in that we robbed the body in desperation, but he was a truth that no one could suffocate. He was a promise that never gave way. I realized when he used his last breath to ask our God, "Why have you forsaken me?" He was simply fulfilling the song from King David's heart. He was the answer to thousands of years of questions. Every story and hero we had ever heard and longed to be true was God, lining the walls of our ears to be ready for this kind of return, for this kind of reclaiming the world. He was a reminder of what it was always supposed to look like to be human. And not every human was happy with the control this kind of redefinition would cost them. Every waning power that had reveled in watching him die was a fistful of panic when they saw the way he planned to keep on living. How no vendetta could reverse a flood. How love was a movement you could not beat out of us. The 3rd day was a trumpet call and a battle cry. Our hearts were war drums giving sound to his name. My friends, if the one we followed could rise again, then my Lord, so could we.
Easter Camp, how are we doing? Awesome. Thanks, Blue. Hey, such a privilege to come and hang out with you guys. As Blue said, man, I'm from Hamilton. My people are Gateway and Crave, and I'm from the Waikato. I'm a pretty simple fella. I've got 2 kids that are amazing, and I've got a wife who's phenomenal. Just the one wife, but man, she is real phenomenal, and I'm happy. And I really like them.
Because you know how the Bible says you've got to love them? But I really, really like them. And I've just been stoked to hang out with you guys this weekend and just hear what's been spitting fresh from the stage. How many are loving Micah? I am jealous muchly. Let's give him a hand, eh? Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, enough about my story. I'm actually really curious about your story. I love stories, especially if they're short ones, because I've got a really short attention span. Anyone with me? There's this little site online at the moment where you can actually go on and upload your story, and you can have millions of people come and view it, but there's one catch. It can only be 6 words long, 6 words story. I wonder what you would write if you only had 6 words. Let's have a look at a couple of them that are on the site. And this one lady says this, she says, ignoring life's problems, eating chocolate instead. Anyone with that? This next one says, boisterous, gas-freed, relief, remorse, pride. Any brothers out there with some boisterous, gas-freed? Ladies, if you're disgusted, look at your boys in your group and say, you need prayer after, that needs a miracle. This next one is logged out, pulled plug, found life. And then here's the camp one. She merely smiled. His world stopped. I thought I'm not very good like Mike at putting words together, but I was thinking, man, if I could get some brownie points for my wife, what would I write? So I was like, I could barely count to 6, but I was like, okay. Wherever you are, there's my home. Is that all right for my wife? How many knows I'm getting some cuddles tonight? Oh, yeah. Okay, so stories are really powerful, right? But stories can be really sad. How about this one? For sale, baby shoes never worn. Stories are powerful. I wonder, though, as you've come into camp this weekend, if you had to sum up the dominant theme of what's going on in your life right now, what would you read? Stories are powerful. One of the greatest things I love at my house, between 5 and 7 p.m., our house is crazy, man. With just nappies, and there's dinner and showers, and all in different orders. But my favorite part is story time. With my boy Levi, who's 3.5 years old, man, we get to snuggle up in bed. He's got his little Thomas torch, right? And he chooses, this is his favorite story book at the moment, the Jesus storybook. And once he's chosen it, he gets his little torch and we read. And about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were reading about Abraham and his son Isaac, and I just thought I'd add a little something extra at the end, and I was like, hey, Levi, boy, do you know who God's son is? And he was like, Jesus? I'm like, yeah, Jesus. And then, before I could keep going, he looked at that story and he said, well, where's God and where's Jesus in this story? I thought, okay, and before I could answer, he started flicking through all the stories, and he's like, got to Jonah, and he said, and where's God in this story? And where, Dad, is God in this story? And by then I'm like, this boy is deep, man. That is a great question. Where is God in this story? Man, I did my best to explain to this little 3-year-old, right, that God's kind of like in all the story. He is the author of the story, and by then he didn't really care. He wasn't even listening, playing with his little jet plane. I'm like, okay, sweet. So we started to pray, and we're praying, and we like, God, just thank you for Levi. Thank you we can trust you. Thank you for Levi's friends. And then he jumps up, totally like just smacking my prayer flow, the little punk, and he presses his lips against my ear, and really, really, really nervously and really quickly, he says, Dad, can you ask him to understand? I said, well, what did you say, son? He said, Dad, can you ask him that I will understand him more? And I was like, my man, one of the proudest moments of my life. I'm going to retire as a parent now because sometimes prayers with little kids, man, like Levi, sometimes he knows how to get me right. I'm like, what do you want to pray for? Poo-poos? And wee-wees. And I was, ooh. And by the way, Dad, when you're sleeping, I'm going to creep up and I'm going to sit on your head in the morning. That's the kind of what I get from prayers, so I was so proud. Here's my boy asking for his God to help him understand where he is in the story. And the reason I share that is because Easter camp, a big part of the team's heart, is that when we come here, it's about you finding God in your story. And it's about you finding your part in God's story. Even for us leaders, hundreds of leaders and volunteers who sacrifice and serve, remember in your serving not to lose sight of the Son. See, at Easter time, we're reunited, we're confronted with the most epic story of all time, right? Where the Father makes a deal with the Son, and the Son ends up being the victim and the hero. But it's a story, right? Even 2,000 years old that still speaks to us. It speaks our language. And as we go to the scriptures, I was just wondering if you would begin looking for your story and his story. So we're going to look at two men and their Easter weekend. Two men that walked along one road and they met one stranger. Just before all the celebrations, just before everyone was pumped with the revelation of the resurrection, these two men and their Easter story where they find themselves absolutely devastated. Their dreams are shattered and they're walking along hopeless. They thought, man, they had found God in their story. They had poured their lives into following this Jesus, and then it all came to a thundering halt. Now growing up, these young men, these young guys, they were no strangers to hope. As young Israelites, they had heard from the time they were little critters that they were God's chosen people, man. There were so many prophecies, so many promises about their nation and their people. They were God's chosen people. At synagogue on Sabbath, man, they would hear prayers and they would hear scriptures read out about how God was powerful and he was going to send them a deliverer to rescue them. Because can you imagine Roman soldiers on every corner of the street in your town? They were waiting for God to send a rescuer to come and make things right. And then they grow up and they meet this Jesus. They start watching him. And they think, man, could he be the one? He's showing all the signs. He goes from town to town teaching and healing and announcing that God is about to do something great. That God is about to bring a kingdom. Maybe he could be the promised Messiah. These two young Jewish followers by then, man, they were in the thick of it. They were on mission. Official disciples of this Jesus. They were pretty pumped. Then everything was happening. The massive crowds, right? Remember, they were pouring in to hear this Jesus speak because he had a mana. He spoke with love and authority. People were giving up everything to follow him. The city began to echo with songs of salvation. Hosanna, Hosanna, we believe you could save us, Son of David. They were on mission, life was good, and then it's over. Jesus gets arrested, crucified, an enemy of the state. No miracle this time. No army of angels that are going to come and lay the smack down on the Romans. It is over. They had put their hope and trust in a person that didn't deliver. Have you ever been there? They put their hope and trust in a person that didn't seem to come through. Maybe you've been let down by someone you trusted. Or perhaps you put your hope in something and it turned out nothing like you had thought and you were left devastated. So these two men, right, they are walking along a road to Emmaus. They were walking to Jerusalem, right? To Jerusalem. They're walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, the very village that they had left. And so confidently dropping everything to follow this Jesus. How embarrassing would that be? So we're going to read in Luke. The same day, so it's Luke 24:13. The same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently along while you're walking?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them replied, "You must be the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard all the things that have happened here for the last few days." What things? I love it. What things, Jesus said. The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth. They said he was a prophet who did miracles, and he was the mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped he was the Messiah who would come to Israel to rescue. Can you imagine what they were feeling? They were completely confused and absolutely gutted by the fact that Jesus had died. The Messiah was not supposed to die, right? So many people had hoped in Jesus. So many people had thought God knew what he was doing. You see, there's parts of the Easter story that are pretty dark, right? And you know what? There's room in the story for some doubt and some darkness, because that story is not just about them way back then. Isn't it true that that story is so often true about us? The Easter story and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, man, it includes some suffering and pain, and includes some doubt and confusion, but ultimately it includes hope and joy and victory. But I'm just here to say the fact is that the more and more you go through life, you and I are going to experience those different dynamics at different times over and over and over again. When something happens to us and we're left and going, where is God in my story? Have you ever felt that way? Where he's far from your situation and you're like, I wonder where you are. See, even though for these men, it's Sunday, right? You must be thinking, especially Sunday, man, what are you doing? Get a V and get happy. But for these guys, at this stage, they had heard some rumors about the risen Jesus, but they hadn't experienced them for himself. Man, I wonder if you've heard rumors and stories about Jesus for a long time, or maybe just fresh this weekend. The reality is it doesn't sink in until you experience them yourself. Open your story up to God and see what happens. So they lament with the stranger. They pour their heart out. They say, we hope things would have been different. I wonder if you've ever whispered that. I hoped that my parents didn't. I had hoped that that relationship wouldn't have. I had hoped that that person didn't do what they did. We join these people in a bit of a bleak part of the Easter story. And I'm just here to say that the Easter story screams at us people. That it says to us in a beautiful way, God has not abandoned the story. God has not abandoned your story. I remember when I was in a bit of a mess and I just needed to know where God was at. I wanted to know if he had forgotten or if he was still worth trusting. And I know that might sound kind of weak, a little bit faithless, but it's my story, so shush. I was 14 years old and my parents had been broken up a year by then. So, year 9, first term, parents break up. Thanks, that's really helpful. Because I've got zits and I'm chubby already and I like girls and it's already hard enough. But I'm 14, right, and my older siblings, they gap it. Man, they're angry and they gap it, they're old enough. And they go down the track, one addicted to drugs for 12 years, other one on speed. Gambling, we all dealt with it differently, but me, my mum, who was my best friend, we moved cities and I just had my little brother. And I remember this night where I questioned God, are you still in the story? Because I shifted about 17 times when I was a teenager, and this is house number 11, and I remember it clearly. My mum tried to hide it from me, how her heart was broken from a broken marriage, but I knew and I carried it. And I wanted my family back, but I was angry at my dad, angry that he left me, angry already some months later, there was rumors of another lady. I was angry. And on this night, my little brother was in bed, man, he was oblivious to all the kind of hopelessness, he was sweet. And I'd noticed the last few weeks that my mum she's working hard, man, house cleaning so we can have some bread up in there, like she was really working hard, but her body, she was looking weak and sick. And what we didn't know then was that cancer had just started eating away at her body. So this night, man, I was desperate. I just walked out, 14 years old, into my backyard. It started raining. And I wept, and I had a cigarette in my hand, and I said, God, it wasn't supposed to be this way. Where are you? It wasn't supposed to be this way. Can I trust you? What made it worse was my mum came out. She stood beside me. She didn't say a word. Must have broken her heart not to know what to say. She stood there. And we both said through gritted teeth, we said, we don't know where you are, but we're going to trust that you're going to move. I want to share that because how true is it? In the midst of our pain and maybe in some of your hopelessness, we tend to turn on God or turn away from Him. Saying, how would you know what it feels like? How would religion have anything to do with my pain right now? You don't have a clue. The Easter story, man. The Easter story is the cross. It's a picture of a cross where Jesus says, me too. Me too. My story, I know, is nothing compared to some of your stories. But I wonder if you're here and you've ever hoped that things were different. If you ever thought yourself saying, please say something. I'm giving up on you. The God that Jesus points to is a God that says, if you've ever been rejected, if you've ever been hurt, if you've ever offered your heart to someone and it was broken, or maybe even ignored, you know how God feels. Hebrews 4:14 says, we don't have a priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing and experienced it all but sin. So let's walk right up to Him and get what He's ready to give, take mercy and accept the help. The cross is where we can come and present our wounds and areas where we lack in hope and say, yeah, you take it. And when we do that, when we become vulnerable, man, I'm more of a real kind of fella. I'm getting too old, even though I'm like 31. I'm getting too old to muck around with the prayers. I just come raw and real and say, take me as I am, me, a sinner. When we come vulnerable to the cross, what happens is no enemy then can make accusations that stick to you. No. There's no hidden skeleton that can fall out of your closet and shock God. There's nothing weak in your character that can make God turn away from you because He's handcuffed Himself to you in love through Jesus. For these disciples, remember they were hopeless. And then hope catches up with them. Jesus is like, remember they think He's still a stranger and they're talking to Him, they're a bit... And Jesus almost slaps them around a bit like, you eggs! Remember what you've been taught. He walked them through the scriptures and the prophetic words and said, remember the Messiah had to suffer. Remember God was always going to do it this way to get the world's attention. And in verse 28 through 31, man, that they showed the stranger hospitality. It's key to understand that. They said, come sleep if you need. Come, we'll put a feed on. And then the stranger goes to pray. He breaks the bread and He blesses it, and suddenly they recognize that it's actually their risen rabbi. It's Jesus that's speaking with them. They recognize that God was never that far off their situation. He was never that uninvolved. Their hope returns, and this is what they do, guys. They get it, man. They go back and they find their other disciples and they start telling them that they've seen Jesus and they're talking about it, and Jesus turns up again there. The disciples are pumped. Jesus lets them see His scars and where the nails went in. And He doesn't stick around for long, and He says this. Just before He gaps it, He says this. Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. Easter story is obviously about Jesus, the sinless one that became sin and defeated death, that us, the broken people that we're far off, can have a relationship with a Holy Father. But Easter is also about how God shows us a model of how we're supposed to do mission. So as your youth communities, as you and your school, Jesus blatantly shows us how we can go on mission and start serving. And then I'm just going to share one last story. And I want you to have a think, how did Jesus come? The one who had everything in heaven, how did He choose to come? So one last story. Ben, you could quietly come on up and join me. Mr. Di Palazzo, everyone say Mr. Di Palazzo. You're lucky he's dead, man, because he needs some more from you. Okay, Mr. Di Palazzo. Ah, kia ora. Good. Mr. Di Palazzo, he was a man that lived in France and during the World War II. And he was an epic man. He hid some Jews in his attic while they were being chased, and they stayed there for a year and a half, right? And after a year and a half, someone told on him, and the Gestapo came, and they took him off into prison. And in there, Mr. Di Palazzo almost died of starvation and the abuse the soldiers tormented him with them. On Christmas Day in 1944, the commandant calls him into his office. And he sits in front of him a meal, and he says this: "Your wife has cooked you a meal. In fact, your wife has brought you a meal every single day you've been here, and I've enjoyed every one of them. And in skin and bones and malnutrition." He looks at the commandant, he says, "Enjoy the meal. I know my wife's a really good cook." And he goes, "What?" He says, "Enjoy the meal. I know my wife's such a good cook." And he says, "How can you say that?" And he goes, "Because I love you." And he gets the guards, he said, "Get this man out of here. He is crazy." Anyway, the time ends, his prison, the war ends, and he goes back home, and he starts a business. He's got a timber yard, and end of the World War, man, it's pretty tough, but God's blessing his business, right? He's got this timber yard, and he's walking to work one day, and he's coming around the corner, and there's some fellas ripping off his timber yard, some thieves stacking this trailer full of wood. And he goes, "God, give me a plan." Some of our youth communities need a plan moving forward. How we make his name famous. How we share the story of the scandal that is the resurrection, the scandal of grace. Anyway, he cruises up and he gets beside these thieves, right? And he starts bending down, chucking wood on the trailer, and like, "Hey, thanks, man, choice." And he says, "Oh, what do you need the wood for?" And they go like, "Oh, we're doing this project, man. We've got to hurry up." And he goes, "Oh, if you're doing that project, you don't want this. It's got, warps and knots." He said, "You want this wood over here." And he starts helping them load this trailer. And they're like, "Man, you know heaps about wood. Have you been ripping off other yards?" And he said, No. I own the place." Can you imagine the fear on their faces? And he's like, "Don't worry, I could have called the cops ages ago." He says, "Don't worry, because you don't know how to live yet. Because you haven't met the one that'll show you how to truly live." And I'm like, what? That is awesome. 3 days later, man, they're in their local church. The guy ends up pastoring that little church. And just as the last part of the story, him and his elderly wife go back to the town where they're in prison to thank God that he didn't die there. And they heard the commandant had been released from his atrocities from prison. And so what they do, she goes, uses the kitchen and cooks a meal. They go and knock on his door, man. And they say, "Hi, on Christmas 1944, you presented a meal, and I know that my wife's a really good cook, and we just wanted to come in peace and have a meal with you." And the commandant's shocked, but he knows it's not a trick, and he lets them in. And they're sitting there in silence, and the commandant smashes his cutlery on the ground. He says, "How can you do this?" He said, "I told you back in prison that I love you." He says, "But how can you do this?" He says, "I couldn't do it, but Jesus changed my life. He loves you and I love you." Both on their knees, giving their lives to following this Jesus. The last instructions that Jesus gave to the disciples and to you and I is this: spread the story of Easter and do it in a sacrificial, serving manner that demands an explanation. Because last question, at what moment, the disciples that thought he was a stranger, at what moment did they recognize that he was Jesus? When they were serving another, when they took their eyes off their pain and situation and began to serve. Blue the other night said, we discover Jesus in brand new ways when we begin to dedicate our lives to serving others. I'm just here just to say, I wonder where you are in the story. Maybe you're here, man, I'm not hurting. What are you drunk, man? It's Easter Sunday. I'm good. It's good. He's risen, and I'm with you, and I'm stoked. So the question for you is, how can my life take on the example of Jesus and dipolazzo and be about serving sacrificially? But maybe you're here and you're right in the middle of some hurt and some pain. For whatever reason, you've lost hope in your story and you need some rescue and some resolve. Can I just say, man, and I know that every youth worker here would just say he's trustworthy. He hasn't abandoned your story. And the thing is that Jesus is still on trial, right? He is still on trial in every one of our hearts. Will we trust him with our future? We trust him with our hurts, our hopes. We trust him with our relationships. And I just want to say he's got this. He has got this. So I just want to finish by praying for you. And the team will come and lead us. And if you would, we're going to stand really quietly, and I just want to bless you and pray for you. Would you stand with me? If I could, I want to just use the words that Jesus told those disciples before he left. And by the way, if you're here and you're like, man, my story is different than yours, but I know I need some help, there'll be some people ready to pray for you. Ask one of your youth leaders. Ask one of the counselling team, pray for me, help me. Let me pray for you. Our God, thank you that you never left, that you never abandoned the story. And thank you that you haven't abandoned ours, but now you're saying to us there's work to be done. You say it's our turn to be the church. And Lord, we hear you because we know there is no other plan. We just want to say to you, risen Jesus, we're in. Even if we're broken, even if we're incomplete, even if we're trying to sort out the journey ourselves, we're in. We want to make your name famous, help us. It's Easter Camp 2014. Peace be with you. As the Father has sent us, I am sending you now. Amen.
Great, so Easter Sunday, he is risen. He is risen indeed. I hope you got something out of that talk from Matt. Make sure that you connect with your youth group leader. If your youth group is not doing anything, man, ring up your youth pastor and say, hey, get a Zoom happening, get a live chat, get something going that's connected. Do a communion over Zoom. Do something today. Enjoy your day, and we'll catch you at 7 tonight. Danielle Strickland, she's going to bring the word.